This is John Costa. We're still at the Documentary Media Centre today for the 3rd of December Disability Newsroom, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And my co-host today is the Research Director of the Women's Research Centre, Sarah Riley. And Sarah, again, has already had two interesting guests, Molly O'Brien and Hannah Webber from the University of Nottingham, and has produced the third guest for us as well. So we're very lucky today to speak to Dr. Tiffany Webster. So Sarah, over to you, and we'll keep going.
Okay, great. Yep. Well, thank you again very much for joining us today. We really greatly appreciate you joining us, Tiffany. First of all, if we just talk a little bit more about the Autism Information Advice Service that you're the service manager of, if you just tell us a little bit more about what it is, what you do, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, that's great. Hi. Yeah, thank you for inviting me today. It's great to be able to talk about the service and be involved in promoting things for people with hidden disabilities. So yeah, I'm service manager for Autism Information and Advice, which is a autism service for Derbyshire County. It's commissioned by Derbyshire County Council and it's based within Citizens Advice Mid Mercia. So we're a holistic service that can support individuals living with autism aged 16 plus. So we specialise in that sort of transition age as well, moving from school into adulthood. And then we also support parents, carers, professionals, friends and family members. So anybody who's involved with somebody living with autism and wants to better support them, really. As I said, we're based within Citizens Advice. So our service is not just autism specific, but we take a holistic view on somebody's circumstances. So it might be that they initially get in touch with us to say they're having difficulties with a neighbour because they're not taking into account maybe their sensory needs. And then we can obviously look into housing support, benefit support, finances, every issue that could be happening in somebody's life to give that whole, like I say, I'm going to keep saying the word holistic over and over again, so apologies for that, but that holistic support to somebody whilst also being completely aware of the needs of somebody living with autism and taking those into account. We're really fortunate that we don't have to do a huge turnover of numbers. Our commissioner is really supportive and wanting us to give quality of service, so we can spend a lot of time with an individual literally looking at their needs and working with them on the best communication methods for them and their client journey. So that's sort of us in a nutshell. We also, like I say, support professionals, so we deliver autism awareness training which is free for all statutory services in Derbyshire County. And so far this year, even though we've been in the midst of a pandemic, we've actually trained over 300 people. So that's been amazing, yeah. And there's lots of services that have taken us up on this offer and are really keen to get their whole workforce autism aware. So yeah, it's been in very difficult circumstances, a sort of great year. So, but yeah.
I suppose it's that drawing the positives out of it, isn't it? And something like the ability now to, I mean, even your gran uses Zoom, you know what I mean? Suddenly people go, well, actually doing my training that would normally be away from the office or whatever, it might not be exactly the same, but with online learning and stuff like that, it actually is quite good. I mean, so really, from that point of view, it's a positive, isn't it? There's more people aware.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if we consider the people that we've delivered training to, so one of the great ones is we've delivered training to over 90 members of prison and probation service in Derbyshire and Derby City. So that's absolutely fantastic, and they've been amazing to work with, and so keen to want to become autism aware and learn more. If you consider the nature of their job roles, if we were business as usual and the pandemic hadn't have happened, it probably would have been impossible to get those staff members all in one place at one time. Yeah. And that's one thing we're definitely finding, that organisations and statutory services that usually would be all over the place and out in the community delivering the amazing work that they're doing, actually this moment of working from home and being virtual, we can really deliver some high quality training to sort of everybody at once, and it's worked incredibly well.
Fantastic. So did you find then, because of COVID, I know you said they wouldn't have had the opportunity before, has there been something because of COVID that's triggered them to want to approach you to sort of get the training and to find out a bit more?
Well, I think, to be honest, everybody's sort of in anticipation for the Autism Act and the changes that are going to come out with that in the new year. I mean, we've been waiting for the Autism Act changes to happen early this year. Because of COVID, it then got delayed, so it's anticipated next year. And there's a lot of anticipation around the language, that it's going to become a much more harder to not deliver autism training to your service, and it's going to become more of a must rather than a should, or it would be good, it will be something that is mandatory. So I think services are really aware of that and do want to become autism aware. So I think there's that. There's also the fact that word of mouth is finally coming out about our service, because we only launched in March, and unfortunately our big launch party was sort of scuppered by COVID. So we plan to have a big launch event to invite all services on Autism Awareness Day in April, but obviously that didn't go ahead. So it's been a bit of a slow start. So I think just all things together, people have learned all about us, are really keen to become autism aware, and I think services are really acutely aware of that and are aware of the challenges that service users face for, let's be frank, services that are set up for neurotypical people. And there is an awareness now that spaces, processes, documents need to be amended to be neurodiverse and autism inclusive. So I think everybody's just really aware of that at the moment, which is great.
Fantastic. It's actually quite interesting what you were saying about kind of documents and not being kind of sort of accessible for a large number of people, because I know with Molly, who we interviewed, whose video is going up later today, she was very much saying something from because she's partially sighted, to do with the sort of like large print or audio, and how there's been a lot of there's been a lot of sort of problems with accessing COVID material because of that. And obviously also at the press conference, there hasn't been a BSL signer either. How would you say with your service, how would you say the COVID information has like been sort of disseminated to users, or have people been approaching you to try and get the information? What would you say COVID's sort of impacted that way?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, accessibility was something we considered from the very offset. So all our communication processes go respond to what a client or a service user actually wants. So if they contact us so we have referral forms, an email address, a helpline, social media. Our website also has an accessibility option, so it can be changed and made more accessible. And however a person contacts us, we then carry on with that communication. So we have had some service users that we've never verbally spoken to because telephone communication doesn't suit their needs and is not where they're most comfortable. So we're open to communicating in any way that suits the service user, really. And that's something that we sort of pride ourselves on. And in particular as well, when we do have phone conversations, as I've mentioned, we're really holistic and we unpick lots of areas. So we definitely try and take the burden off people to not have to think about recording any of the conversation that we've got. They don't need to worry about making notes or keeping a record of the services or specialist advice we mentioned. We take all that on board and then we'll get that to them in what method they prefer. We were commissioned during COVID to also do a autism and learning disabilities survey on behalf of the CCB in Derbyshire and Derby City, and as well as Derbyshire County Council. And one of the things we did in that was we made an easy read version as well, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that anybody with learning disabilities or sight issues could contribute to that survey, which was really important to find out how people from those communities experienced COVID in particular, how they could access services during that time. And this was one of the things that was raised in the final report, which can be found on our website, that yes, service access differed just hugely across the board. And communication about how services were functioning. So, I mean, one of the things we found was that GP surgeries, lots of people weren't accessing them because they didn't know they were open. So again, it was communication from other services. So we've definitely found a lot of information that all services can take on board and sort of try and implement. And we also, part of our professional training, we support people in amending their processes and procedures. So, for example, off the back of our autism awareness raising, we've supported in doing like space audits. So helping an organisation look at their rooms and their spaces and how they can become more autism inclusive. So what is it about a space that might be more challenging for somebody who's neurodiverse? Because we implement lots of things, I think, that suit neurotypical people to help ease their relaxation. So putting music on, having the radio on, having lots of posters around, but actually some of the things we implement for neurotypical people actually have the detrimental impact on a neurodiverse person. So we've been helping doing things like that. So yeah, our support is wide ranging, and we're happy to try and in any way really to support a service.
It was interesting a couple of years ago with the High Cross Shopping Centre. We undertook a project having like a silent hour, hour around autism and stuff. And again, one of our friends who's actually a BBC radio broadcaster here on BBC Radio Leicester, Rupal Johnny, has a balance condition. And she said actually that actually made it a better condition for her to be able to shop in as well for that hour. So again, it's that wider benefits as well, isn't it? That sometimes when we look at something, a provision for a particular type of person or ability or disability or whatever difference, you know, we talk a lot about normal, you know, I mean, what is normal, you know? So suddenly when we shine a light on a particular group, what we suddenly realize is to actually make things better and change the environment and make it inclusive for them actually has positive benefits on other people as well.
Certainly, I think a lot of the things we look at with organisations would definitely benefit anybody with a mental health condition, particularly sort of anxiety, anybody who's nervous of approaching services. So yeah, whilst our support is focused on supporting neurodiverse individuals, actually, like you said, you're totally right, it has a huge wider impact and can make services on the whole more accessible. So for example, one of the services we supported, they noted to us that to get to their waiting room, you had to go through other areas of the building, and they realised that can be really off-putting for service users. So one of their plans would be to video the route to get to the waiting room, and that obviously will benefit everybody, not just somebody who's neurodiverse. So yeah, it's definitely just, I think, on the whole, making services better for service users, no matter what their needs, really.
And do you think society has started to understand autism more, you know, autism, Asperger's and stuff like that? Do you think it's gone beyond the Rain Man, you know, sort of, we often talk about the role of television and entertainment and popular culture in people's perceptions of abilities and disabilities? You know, all Bond villains have some kind of disability, some sort of impairment or disfigurement. And so I remember we were talking about the role of, you know, Casualty and things like EastEnders in having characters that do that. Do you think there's a wider understanding and an acceptance of autism now, and people with that kind of condition that is making it better? Are you seeing that come through in what service users and parents are saying to you and families?
Certainly, I think there's still a lot of confusion about where neuro development conditions lie. So one thing we've learned through our delivery of training is that people feedback to us that, oh, previously I've had training where I was taught it's a mental health condition, or I was taught it's a learning disability. So I think, unfortunately, neurodevelopment tends to get lumped in with other areas, and there's not always that real clarity on, no, it is a separate condition that might have those other things involved, but needs to be understood on its own as well. So I think there's a real growing movement towards that and totally understanding it in itself, and also a big understanding that it is not just a condition either, it's a condition for an individual, and that's something we definitely stress. And we always open our training by saying, okay, this is a generalised course, but the big thing I want you to know is you've got to learn about your individual clients and how their autism is experienced. So take somewhat of a say with a pinch of salt, because it is a generalization about autism, but learn about your client or learn about your service user. And I think with what you said about popular culture, there's much more positive and realistic examples of individuals living with autism in popular culture and learning disabilities or physical disabilities across the board, with more actors now getting roles where they just play I don't want to say a normal person, but they just have a role. They don't need to be the disabled person in that. It's just they have a role, as any actor wants to act and portray a role. And I think that's wonderful. I know there's a lot of criticism. There's been a bit lately about Sia, the musician, her casting neurotypical people in place of neurodiverse people, and the argument that neurodiverse people can't cope with learning a script or being on set. And I think that's again a huge misunderstanding. There's a lot of neurodiverse actors out there who I'm pretty sure could prove that that's false and that they can act incredibly well. So I think soaps are doing a good thing really there. I'm not a follower of soaps, but I know that they are doing great work in moving more people into acting and giving those opportunities to show that anybody with a disability, hidden or obvious, can do the same things that anybody who's typical as well. So yeah, to answer your question in my long rambling way, you'll notice I do that. Yeah, I think there is a movement towards better understanding it and more being more inclusive across the board, really.
Cool. Can I ask you a question from a sort of parental point of view as well? I mean, are you finding that, you know, when parents come to you, maybe you know, with a son or a daughter that are about to leave education, you know, what kind of, because I know a few examples of that here in Leicester. You know, they've really had a challenge with, like, the colleges in particular offering sort of, you know, it's probably activities that were unsuitable, you know, for someone like that, and they're kind of putting them under a lot of pressure to fit in with what the college does, as opposed to putting in place things for people.
Yeah.
Are you finding that from parents?
I think that's always a challenge. I mean, my background is actually working in education. So prior to this, I've got a doctorate. So I worked in universities. I then worked in mainstream schools and alternative educations and special educational needs schools. So it's definitely a challenge across the board. Yes, that, again, as I've mentioned, neurodiversities tends to sometimes just be put in with all of the, like I say, learning disabilities or all of the special educational needs, and that's not always appropriate. And obviously, I'm aware that often in school environments comes down to resources and, unfortunately, the horrible word of funding. So that's very, very challenging. But yeah, I think in terms of transition, particularly when somebody's been at a school that maybe has been very good and very supportive, and also the bond that's been made with staff members that have really understood a student, moving into somewhere new, particularly if that place hasn't got a sixth form or affiliated college and somebody can't do that movement with them, yeah, it is a huge worry, and parents do generally get very concerned. I mean, we always try to encourage early contact to the next place, get in touch with them, find out what's on offer, do lots of visits, try and make that transition really gradual, like do it bit by bit, ask if they can come and visit at the school, and then you go and visit at the college. And then also, yeah, trying to ensure the college understands the unique needs, not just, it's a new student with autism, it's, well, what about that student, what about their autism? So any alternative education, further education, we would encourage to do lots of meetings with that individual to learn what suits them, and not just think, oh, well, they can be put in the SEND department or something like that. Because it's, yeah, again, I'll keep sort of harking on, with autism, you've just got to learn about the individual and do what suits them, really, and follow their lead.
No, I definitely think that's the case. I think you can say that with a lot of other kind of disabilities and health conditions as well. It's very much needs to be based on the individual, because I always say, like, with disabilities, like an umbrella term, because obviously all the things that come underneath, everybody can be so different, even with the same condition and such forth. Just sort of, when you also mention kind of sort of transition and everything, do you find that when people are moving from sort of youth services to adult services, and obviously all your care needs can change during this time, how do you support that, and what are the sort of issues you tend to sort of see come up and everything?
Yeah, so there is, again, yeah, there's very different points, and the transition seems to change at different age groups depending where in the county or whether in the city, and it's really challenging. Yeah, so the pathway doesn't seem to be all that clear sometimes. So I know there's a lot of work at the moment happening on what is the child and young person's pathway, when does the transition to adulthood start, for what service, for adult social care, for the assessment teams. So yeah, I think that is really problematic, and it doesn't seem to be the same, like I say, across the board. With the people that get in touch with us, we definitely have very different experiences every time. I think being dropped by services is a huge worry. So when you've spent your time with CAMS, for example, that then all of a sudden that disappears, or trying to approach, one of the things we're finding at the moment, individuals approaching adult mental health services, and unfortunately them saying, no, we don't support anybody who's neurodiverse, because your mental health condition is a product of your neurodiversity. which is not the case at all. So that's very, very challenging, and trying to support individuals in having the empowerment to challenge that and to get to the right people to say, no, that's not accurate. Actually, you need to understand my case and assess me as you would any other case. So they're the sort of things we find, really. It's accessing different services moving forward, and when the neurodiversity is unfortunately an obstacle when it shouldn't be. There should be people trained in, like I say, mental health services in particular, to support individuals with autism. And that's one of the things that we would like to, hopefully this might reach out to individuals from health services to say, well, we can deliver that. We can deliver that to hospitals, assessment teams and all sorts, because if you're a statutory service, that's our job. We can deliver that to you freely. So hopefully to try and alleviate that. But yeah, it's really hard, and we just, like I say, support on a case-by-case basis. We've supported with, unfortunately, obviously complaints through PALS and things like that, and we never want to get to that point where we're a service that's just supporting with complaints, but that's what we will do to ensure somebody gets the support they need, really. So and it's never nice to see a parent having to go through PALS and things like that, because their child's sort of dropped off the radar with what support they need, just because they happen to have turned 18, for example. So yeah, it is very difficult.
Have you also found that with COVID, because certain aspects of the Care Act have been suspended, have you kind of have you had many people approach you in relation to their services being dropped at this time, or any other issues they might be coming up against?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest things overall that's missing, that we've had people crying out for, is respite and day services. So they're the two big ones, really, which I'm sure comes as no surprise that they've not been running. And I think we're at a point now where there needs to be more thought put into how they can run. If this is what's happening with society now, if we're going to have to go in and out of lockdowns, if illnesses like this occur again, we need to have a better plan. We can't just shut things down and say, oh, well, we can't somehow risk assess individuals with learning disability meeting a day centre. Like, that can't be a legitimate excuse for not running something. Yeah, exactly. If we've managed to open schools and that young children can mix again, we can certainly do the same for day services and respite services. So, but I know it's very complex, but that's certainly the area that we've had people crying out for, to be honest. And also people being redeployed across the NHS, that's had a huge impact for autism. And again, I don't think obviously that's anything to do with the assessment teams. They've obviously been redeployed and told where to go, but that has had a huge knock-on effect for waiting lists and things like that. So it's those people in particular during COVID that we found were on waiting lists, that have been left very much in limbo. So those individuals who were sort of about to start getting their assessment, and that's now been significantly delayed. So we put a lot of work in developing resources that could support somebody while waiting. So we've done a lot of work with Relate in Derby, and they have a service called Living Well with Autism, where they deliver a specific counselling service for newly diagnosed adults, and a one-day training course for family members to learn more about their family members' autism. And it's absolutely an amazing resource, and we've worked closely with them to deliver that virtually during lockdown, so that people who were on a waiting list could still learn about autism in their age range, or learn about different autistic traits, get their family to learn a bit more, and need to start putting in that groundwork of a bit of support before the actual formal diagnosis is achieved. So we've done a lot to do that. And like I say, the counsellors at Living Well with Autism have been fantastic, and we've filmed lots of videos that are on our YouTube channel. So we've done a series of 5 that look at autism in different ages, and then they've also done another series of 5 that breaks down the one-day course and the counselling they'd normally offer. So yeah, we definitely direct people to that while things weren't happening face-to-face, or like I say, while waiting lists are happening.
Fantastic.
I think one of the best things about listening to you, having listened to many people over the years talking about lots of different subjects and stuff like that, is you get this perfect meeting of people. You know what I mean? So you've got a supportive, commissioner, you've got you as the service manager, the team. You know what I mean? You get this perfect scenario where it demonstrates and proves to you it doesn't have to go badly. It can be done. So we talk about, let's get some best practice. How do we kind of implement a service where it is fully inclusive? And I think we're just speaking to Hannah Webber there, the Disability Support Officer at the University of Nottingham. She's talking about a supportive VC. you know, vice chancellor, all the way down to the team, you know, and everybody pulling in the right direction. As someone who runs a museum, archive and library, and as a freelance journalist and teaches at the university and says to people, what are you doing to share that work? How do you do that? It's great that you've put those videos on YouTube. How are you telling people? It's great that you have these meetings and you've got these examples. How are you sharing that with other your kind of more sort of academic but also clinical colleagues about best practice? Are you finding there's a willingness to learn that kind of stuff? Because obviously it all costs money, doesn't it? And it all comes down to this.
Certainly. I mean, like I say, I'm very lucky that I'm based within Citizens Advice Mid Mercia, which is an incredibly forward-thinking citizens advice. We offer a wide range of different sort of health-based services as well as traditional advice services. So just to give people an update, like we have a carers service for statutory support in Derby City. We have a cancer support service. We have support for homelessness individuals. We have absolutely everything across the board as a citizens advice, as well as all the traditional benefits, housing, all those things. So I think that's really exciting that are based in that sort of environment. And again, we have a really forward-thinking CEO and deputy CEO, and that's really exciting. And again, I am lucky I've got a really supportive commissioner from Derbyshire County Council who, whenever we sort of go, could we do this? Could we do a YouTube channel? Like, okay, let's do it. And nobody really ever sort of luckily challenges us in terms of the weird and wonderful things. And my team are absolutely wonderful. Our community engagement worker, I think, sort of dreads every time I phone her because she knows I've got a new idea and it's probably going to make her do something embarrassing. So like we produced a video for our GP surgeries that had, I think, it's clocked in over 3,000 views now on Facebook. And yeah, that was, I think, quite embarrassing for her, but she did an amazing job and she's now sort of the face of our service, bless her. And that went out to all our GPs so that even though we couldn't get into them, they could show that on their TV screens, they could put it on their own social media, they could send it out to patients who they've got on their records living with autism. So we've tried really hard to embrace the situation we're in and to go for anything we can virtually that gets out there. So we've got a Facebook page, we've got a website, and our website's got so many downloadable resources. We try and put absolutely everything on there, from things that you can put in the car if you've got a child living with autism, that if you had an accident, they might not respond in a manner that would be typical, to alert people to things like that. We also pioneered the autism passport. So that was a huge achievement for Derbyshire. So we found out that during COVID, there was a huge issue with individuals living with autism who were being admitted with COVID. And obviously, because of the sensory needs and all the PPE and everything, it was becoming really challenging. And nurses and so on were trained and to try and support somebody with autism during that. So we, based with our clinical team, who we directly support, so the adult assessment team, we very quickly produced the autism passport and got that out there. And that luckily is accredited by Derbyshire County Council, Derbyshire and Derby City CCG, Derbyshire Autism Services, Derby University, Citizens Advice. So we managed to get some big hitters on board to accredit the passport and get it disseminated out there. We did that very quickly, so we didn't really get a chance to do any co-production with individuals with autism, but our plan is next year, when hopefully the world now is getting a bit more accessible again, we're going to hold a series of public consultations on that to see how the passports worked and how we can make it more user-friendly for individuals with autism to complete. So yeah, we are really passionate about just working together. Like I said, we work with Living Well with Autism, we work with Derbyshire Autism Services, we work with I've got to remember everybody now. Autism Derby.
It's like your award speech, isn't it? You're going to leave someone out and then they won't like it.
Yeah, exactly. Autism Derby, a lady called Julie Fern. We work with Autism Plus as well at the top of the county. We work with absolutely everybody to try and make this sort of across the board approach. And we're planning lots of events with them. So we want to do an employment event in the new year with Autism Plus. We've launched the Autism Alliance, which is a peer support group, which everybody, all those people can come to, as well as individuals and family members. And that will feed back to the Autism Partnership Board, which we also work at, and we feed back on everything that we produce to them. So yeah, I think we are just really responsive to what service users need, to what issues are happening, and we just try and get it done, really. That's sort of our motto, that we try and get things out there to support people as quickly as we can. I mean, we got face masks, exempt cards out there really fast, and all those supportive things, trying to just, yeah, like I said, I keep saying responsive, can't think of another word, just to be really responsive to what's happening, really. And that's our passion, that it's really great to be able to meet and talk about things and get everybody's involvement, but sometimes the need is there, so you've got to go with it. And I think that's something we've done really well, to be honest. And that's all the feedback we've had from our service users, that we've got stuff to them really quickly, despite the circumstances. But yeah, no, it's been a difficult time, but a great time. And there's been some really great collaborative work, and everybody's feeding into each other's services, really.
Well, it's inspiring to hear you. I think, if there was ever a demonstration I'd heard in quite a while about collaboration and the ability of people to be able to work together for the common issue and stuff like that, I think it's an exemplar, really. I must admit, I take my hat off to you. I think maybe that should have been an award speech. I'm afraid we've got nothing to give you other than the time to capture it, maybe for the first time, what you thought as opposed to other people about it. Okay. What do you think? What does the world look like in 12 months' time for your service?
I think we'll have just grown exponentially. I mean, we have, luckily, we've managed to shuffle things around, and we've got a new staff member, because, like I said, the training that we're delivering, we've delivered to over 300 people. We see that continuing. We're going to be involved in, obviously, delivering autism training across the board, with the change to what the Autism Act's going to say and what that means for local authorities. Just working in collaboration, really. So we've got a new staff member starting next week, which is going to be a new advisor with us. That's really exciting. So I just think growth, really, and just adding further strings to our bow. So we want to we're about to start working with Autism East Midlands, because they deliver what are called autism hubs across the county, and they're like peer support groups. And we obviously have our peer support group. So as a service, we never want it to be, well, this is our peer support group and that is yours. We want them all to work together. So we're meeting with them to see how their hubs and our group can work together. We constantly refer across the board to Derbyshire Autism Services. So they're a very on-the-ground service. They have this amazing companion scheme where individuals with autism can use their benefits and PIP and things like that to pay for the services of a companion who can help them gain confidence out in the community and access services that they couldn't previously access. So we work closely with them, and whilst we do the sort of signposting and advice giving, we don't currently do sort of on the ground stuff, but we have amazing services, like I say, like Derbyshire Autism Services, that do that on the ground. So we're very much keen to make sure the people who can do the specialist things, we refer to them and we pass people on to them, because we want them to go to the best service deliverer. So that's what we're really passionate about, really. And like I say, with Living Well with Autism, they are the counselling side. So we know anybody who needs a counselling goes to them. So we've got this great map of who's a specialist at what, and then because we triage the sort of needs. So what would be great in 12 months' time is to see any areas where there's little gaps, that we identify them and that there's funding available for filling those gaps. And I think that's definitely some gaps in child services. There's gaps in sort of training for parent carers, so free training. There's, like I say, there's the one-day course with Relate, but that's about it. It would be great if there's more free resources out there, so that parents can feel empowered in their parenting, and carers can feel like ready for any circumstances, supporting somebody with autism. So yeah, we're sort of up for anything, really, just to grow the service, and that's why it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great value in preventative work, obviously, putting money in at the start when there isn't an issue, in order to make sure it don't become an issue. But I think, as someone who's done some stuff around the criminal justice system as well, particularly prisons, it's great that you're doing that, because that's almost work that you're doing that you're unable to measure, so therefore you're unable to get funding for or give a report on. So it's actually quite good, because it means that those officers then use that in order to support prisoners in probably in a really vulnerable situation. That then means that when they do come back round full circle, if they do come back through your door, at least you know that they've had some response at that time that might stop something happening. I remember when we did something a few International Disability Days ago, where overnight we were doing a 24-hour newsroom, and so the police and the ambulance service had this joint mental health car that went out. So when they were on patrol, there was always one on patrol. If a call went out that the person had a kind of mental health issue or condition, this car got called to that because they were able to. So the idea was to stop as many people as possible being sectioned or taken there straight away. And they were seeing the benefits of that. So you're constantly kind of fighting this. We need funding to turn around and say, well, actually, you can't measure it, but you can, because it doesn't end up in these kind of things. I guess that's your greatest challenge, isn't it? How do you share that information and make sure that your funding keeps coming through?
Yeah, I think preventative is certainly one thing that we want to definitely support. I mean, we've worked with the adult assessment team to produce a post-assessment pack. So once somebody's had a diagnosis, they get given very clearly a pack so they know all the support on offer, and that there's no stress then of trying to work out, well, how do I come to terms with my diagnosis? How does my diagnosis affect my job or what I may be entitled to? Asking for reasonable adjustments. We've produced a pack so that they know straight away who they can contact. So yeah, I think it's getting in there at the initial point so that anybody knows where to go. And I think when you look at conditions like autism, when there's high levels often of anxiety, it's trying everything we can to alleviate those levels of anxiety as well. That obviously, being neurodiverse and sort of thrown out into a neurotypical world, you're inevitably going to have to negotiate and live with. So I think trying to put anything we can to alleviate any anxiety and make things more neurodiverse inclusive is really important, and that's sort of our goal really. And we're happy off the back of this, any statutory service or private service that wants a hand with that, we can certainly try and help. So
fantastic. It's one thing I think it's great with what you do as well, is you're not just talking about it, you're actually kind of doing something with that as well. I know, John, I've said many times about other issues that it's all fine and good to kind of talk about things, but really kind of what change are you going to do, what you're actually going to do to action something. And I think that's really important. I know, because obviously you're now working with the East Midlands, so slightly wider afield service. Do you tend to use like any best practice from other parts of the country, or kind of like share information with other groups, or sort of how do you go about those sort of things as well?
That's something we're really passionate about growing. We really want to start getting involved in cross-county things. At the minute, we've been trying to grow our presence, obviously, in Derbyshire and making sure everybody knows who we are. But that's definitely on our radar for year 2, to sort of grow links with Leicestershire, because obviously Derbyshire's got so many boundaries, and boundaries is something we find really challenging. So we deal with a lot of people whose postcode might be Derbyshire, but their GP might be just on the other county nearby, or vice versa, or somebody who lives in Derbyshire but attends a school elsewhere. And that's really challenging, and we do struggle with that quite a lot, and we try and be very flexible in terms of our support. That yes, we do support Derbyshire, but if there's any sort of lack of clarity about boundaries, we still try and help. So that's on our radar to definitely do, because we want to link in with, like I say, Leicestershire, Staffordshire. We work with the Sheffield neurodiversity assessment team as well, so growing our area, our knowledge up there. That's something we're passionate about really, and I think having sort of support that is across county as well for those individuals that sort of get trapped to our county lines, and sharing best practice, like you said. I think there's a habit that we go, well, this is what our county, our local authority has developed, and that's what we're going to focus on. I think it'd be great if local authorities could talk, and we could develop a Midlands network. We've just signed up to be part of the National Autism Alliance, so hopefully we'll get more involved in different county things by that. But yeah, so I think that's something we desperately want to be involved in. And again, if anybody off the back of this from Leicestershire or Nottingham or so on sees us, we will be happy to start talking and doing that best practice sharing.
I'm sure they'll be knocking at your door.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Careful. When you sort of offer information, all of a sudden you'll get a stampede or something. Yeah. Definitely. Careful what you wish for, yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, listen, thank you very much. Again, we said, 15, 20 minutes, and here we've been speaking for nearly 40, I think. So it's great. Thank you for taking the time. I'm sure you're incredibly busy.
Thank you so much.
To share your knowledge so openly and so willingly as well, I think, and also demonstrate your passion, similar to Hannah did a minute ago, about, making sure people are included and get the best, and that they shouldn't be left as second class, I guess, really, you know what I mean, or people that, you know, don't deserve an opportunity. So it's been great to talk to you. Thank you very much for supporting our newsroom.
No, that's great. Thank you for the invite. It's been great.